The year is 1840. The place is the tiny, obscure village of Ars in France. A small, emaciated priest sits in a wooden box, the confessional, for 16, sometimes 18 hours a day. He is besieged. Thousands of pilgrims travel from all over Europe just to look at him, to touch his cassock, to hear his voice. They come carrying heavy burdens, murderers, thieves, adulterers, and blasphemers. You would think that these great sinners would be the ones to terrify the saint. You would think that hearing the confessions of crimes and blood would be what made him weep. But you would be wrong. St. John Vianney, the man who could read souls like an open book, was not afraid of the cold-blooded criminal. He knew that the criminal often knows he is sick and, in a moment of grace, can be resurrected. No. The souls that made the Curé of Ars tremble, the souls that he saw falling into the abyss in the greatest numbers, were not the monsters. They were the regulars. They were the people who sat in the pews every Sunday. They were the people who considered themselves good Catholics. They were the victims of the most dangerous spiritual disease in existence, lukewarmness. St. John Vianney described the destination of these souls with a terrifying clarity. He didn't see them ascending to the glory of God. He saw them drifting slowly but surely into the gates of hell, not because they hated God, but because they didn't love him enough to fight for him. He warned that the lukewarm soul is a soul that is slowly rotting from the inside out, often without even realizing it until the moment of judgment, when it is too late. In this deep dive documentary, we are going to expose this invisible cancer. We are going to analyze the Curé of Ars' specific diagnosis of the tepid soul. We will look at the symptoms he identified, symptoms that you might find in your own daily life. We will explain why he famously said, "A great sinner is easier to convert than a tepid Christian," and we will reveal the ultimate fate he saw for those who try to serve two masters. This is not just a history lesson, this is a spiritual autopsy. But before we begin this difficult examination, I ask you to humble yourself. The tepid soul never thinks this message is for them. They always think it is for their neighbor. Break that cycle right now. Pause the video and write in the comments, "Lord, set my heart on fire." Admitting we are cold is the first step to getting warm. And if you are ready to hear the hard truths that modern priests are often too afraid to preach, subscribe to Divine Echo. Let us walk into the confessional of Ars together. To understand the horror of lukewarmness, we must first define it as St. John Vianney did. He was not talking about people in mortal sin, people who are spiritually dead. The lukewarm soul is technically alive. They are in a state of grace, barely. They are not murdering, stealing, or committing adultery, and this is exactly why they are in such danger. The Curé of Ars compared them to a person with a slow, sleeping sickness. They don't feel pain, so they don't call the doctor. He described the lukewarm soul with brutal precision. A tepid soul is one that is not quite dead in the eyes of God, but is very sick. It is a soul that has no strength, no energy, no courage. It drags itself to prayer. It drags itself to Mass. It does the bare minimum to avoid hell, but it has no desire for heaven. The terror of this state lies in its stability. The saint warned that while a sinner in the mud knows he is dirty, the lukewarm soul thinks it is clean. They compare themselves to the bad people of the world and say, "Well, at least I am not like them." They create a false sense of security. St. John Vianney saw where this road ends. He saw that this path does not lead to purgatory, as many hope. He taught that purgatory is for those who loved God but had imperfections. Lukewarmness, however, is a lack of love, and you cannot enter the kingdom of love if you have spent your life calculating the minimum amount of love required to get in. One of the most chilling insights from his sermons is the concept of the vomit of God. He frequently quoted the book of Revelation. "So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth." Vianney explained that this spitting out is a violent rejection. God can handle the cold, the sinner, because the cold can be heated. He loves the hot, the saint. But the lukewarm makes him sick. Why? Because the lukewarm soul abuses God's friendship. They treat God like a boring relative they have to visit once a week. They take his sacraments with a yawn. They insult his majesty not with rebellion but with indifference. St. John Vianney said, The lukewarm Christian touches the heart of God more painfully than the open enemy, because he claims to be a friend while he kisses Jesus with the lips of a traitor. The Curé of Ars identified 3 specific symptoms of this disease. If you recognize these in yourself, do not panic, but do not look away. The first symptom is routine without heart. Vianney watched his parishioners closely. He saw them come to Mass, kneel and move their lips, but he saw their minds were in the market, in the fields, or in their businesses. He said, "The tepid soul prays, yes, but how do they pray? Without attention, without reverence, without expectation. They speak to God as if they were speaking to a beggar. They want the prayer to be over before it has even begun." He saw that their prayers never reached heaven. They fell to the floor, heavy with the weight of boredom. The second symptom is confession without transformation. This was Vianney's daily torture. He saw people coming to confession week after week, year after year, confessing the exact same list of small sins. "Father, I got angry. Father, I told a lie. Father, I was distracted." They received absolution, but they never changed. Why? Because, as Vianney explained, they had no firm purpose of amendment. They didn't really want to stop sinning. They just wanted to clear their conscience. They were using the blood of Christ as a cheap cleaning service. He warned, "My friend, you are not being cured. You are merely adding the sacrilege of a bad confession to your list of sins." He saw that this cycle of routine confession hardens the heart until it becomes like stone, impervious to grace. The third and most dangerous symptom is peace with defect. The saint taught that the sign of a living Christian is struggle, war. The saint is always fighting his temper, his laziness, his pride. The lukewarm soul, however, has signed a peace treaty with the enemy. They say, "This is just how I am, I can't change, God understands." Vianney screamed from the pulpit against this lie. "You say you cannot change. You are calling God a liar. He gives you the grace, but you are too lazy to pick up the weapon." He saw that this peace was actually the silence of a spiritual coma. In his visions and spiritual insights, St. John Vianney saw the deathbed of the lukewarm soul. It is a scene of absolute tragedy. The person has lived a decent life. They expect to die peacefully. But in the final moments, when the devil launches his last and most furious attack, the lukewarm soul finds it has no weapons. It has never practiced fighting. It has no reservoir of love to draw from. It is like a soldier who shows up to the front line without a gun. Vianney saw these souls falling into despair in their final moments, realizing too late that they wasted the precious time God gave them. They didn't commit crimes, but they committed the crime of wasting grace. This introduction to the mind of the Curé of Ars sets the stage for the deeper horror he revealed, the specific way the devil manages the lukewarm soul. The devil does not tempt the lukewarm soul to murder. He is too smart for that. He tempts them to remain exactly as they are. He rocks their cradle. He whispers, "You are fine. You are good enough. Don't listen to that fanatical priest." In the next part of this documentary, we will expose the devil's strategy for the good Catholic and the horrifying vision Vianney had regarding the Holy Eucharist and the lukewarm communicant. St. John Vianney often preached that the devil is a master psychologist. He knows exactly how to handle different types of souls. With the great sinner, the devil acts like a violent tyrant, pushing them deeper into crime and despair. But with the lukewarm soul, the devil acts like a careful nurse. This was one of the Curé of Ars' most shocking revelations. The devil is afraid to tempt you too much. Think about that for a moment. It sounds contradictory. We assume the devil always wants us to do the worst possible evil. But Vianney saw the game. He explained that if the devil were to tempt a lukewarm good Catholic to commit a murder or a blatant act of adultery, that person would likely be horrified. Their conscience would scream. They would run to the confessional in tears, and the devil would lose them. So the devil adopts a different strategy, the anesthesia of small sins. Vianney preached, "The demon is very careful not to awaken the tepid soul. He does not push them to great crimes. Instead, he provides them with 1,000 valid excuses for their small faults. He whispers, 'You don't need to pray the whole rosary today. You are tired. God understands.' He whispers, 'You don't need to give alms to that beggar. You have your own bills to pay.' He whispers, 'It's okay to gossip a little. Everyone does it. The goal is to keep the soul in a state of spiritual paralysis. The devil wants the lukewarm soul to feel safe. He wants them to look at the murderer and say, "Thank God I am not him," while they slowly drift into hell on a river of laziness. Vianney compared this to a man in a boat who stops rowing. He doesn't need to drill a hole in the boat to sink. The current alone will take him over the waterfall. The devil's job is simply to keep you from picking up the oars. This leads to the most terrifying aspect of the lukewarm life, the abuse of the Holy Eucharist. For St. John Vianney, the Eucharist was the center of the universe. He would often cry while holding the host, overwhelmed by the reality that God was in his hands. But what he saw from the pulpit broke his heart. He saw lines of people approaching the altar, not to receive a king, but to consume a habit. He described the lukewarm communion with words that should make us tremble. He saw souls approaching the altar with minds filled with the world. They had just spent the entire Mass thinking about their farm, their clothes, or their Sunday lunch. They had no hunger for Jesus. They opened their mouths, received the Creator of the universe, and then nothing. No thanksgiving, no love. They walked back to their pews and immediately started looking around at other people. Vianney warned, "You treat the body of Christ with less respect than you would treat a crumb of bread on your table." He explained that receiving communion without preparation and without thanksgiving is a spiritual disaster. Instead of feeding the soul, it hardens it. It is like pouring water onto a rock. The rock gets wet, but it does not grow. Over time, the lukewarm communicant becomes immune to grace. They can receive Jesus every Sunday for 40 years and never become a saint. In fact, they become worse because they become familiar with the holy, and familiarity breeds contempt. Vianney had a vision of the angels at Mass. He said that if we could see the reality of the altar, we would die of terror and love. The angels cover their faces before the host. The seraphim tremble. And yet, the lukewarm Catholic walks up with his hands in his pockets, distracted, bored, wishing the priest would hurry up. Vianney said, "Woe to the priest who rushes the Mass, and woe to the people who are bored by the sacrifice of Calvary. You are bored by the very thing that keeps the world from being destroyed." This abuse of the sacraments creates a specific kind of blindness. The Curé of Ars called it the blindness of the almost saved. He often used the parable of the barren fig tree. In the Gospel, Jesus curses the fig tree not because it produced bad fruit, poison, but because it produced no fruit. It was just leaves. It looked like a healthy tree. It took up space in the garden. It consumed the soil's nutrients and the sun's light, but it was useless. Vianney applied this to the good people of his parish. He told them, "You are the trees in God's garden. You have been watered with baptism. You have been fed with the Eucharist. You have been pruned by the sermons. And yet, where is the fruit? Where is your charity? Where is your patience? Where is your zeal for souls?" He warned that God is patient, but he is not a fool. A tree that takes up resources without giving fruit eventually gets cut down. The lukewarm soul is living on borrowed time. They are using God's graces, their health, their time, their money, for themselves, not for his kingdom. Vianney saw that many of these souls would be shocked at the judgment. They will arrive expecting a reward for not being bad, and they will hear the terrifying words, "I was hungry and you gave me no food." Not that they stole food, but that they gave none. The sin of omission is the special trap of the lukewarm. Vianney also attacked the worldly spirit that infects the lukewarm. He saw good families who tried to mix God and the world. They wanted to go to Mass in the morning and to the immoral dances in the evening. They wanted to wear the crucifix but also wear the immodest fashions of Paris. Vianney was ruthless with this duality. He screamed, "You cannot please God and the world. They are enemies. You must choose." He saw the lukewarm soul trying to build a bridge between heaven and hell, trying to walk on both sides. But he warned that when death comes, the bridge collapses. You fall into the side you loved the most. And if you love the world's opinion more than God's law, you fall into the world's master, the devil. There is a story of a woman who came to him and said, "Father, I am not like the others. I don't commit big sins." Vianney looked at her and asked, "My daughter, do you love God?" She replied, "I think so." He asked, "Do you long to see him? Do you burn to be with him?" She hesitated. Well, I am in no hurry to die. Vianney sighed. That is the mark of the tepid. You are comfortable in exile. You treat the earth as your home and heaven as a backup plan. But God accepts no backup plans. He demands to be the first love, or he is no love at all. The suffering of St. John Vianney for these souls was physical. He fasted for days on old potatoes. He scourged himself. He spent nights weeping in front of the tabernacle. Why? Because he saw the tragedy of the near miss. He saw souls that were so close to being saved. They had the faith. They had the church. They had everything they needed, but they lacked the will to push through the final door. They were like sailors who crossed the entire ocean only to drown in the harbor because they were too lazy to throw the rope. He said, "How terrible it will be to see the saints in heaven, to see our own family members there, and to know that we could have been with them if only we had exerted a little violence against our own laziness. To fall into hell is a tragedy. To fall into hell from the steps of the altar is a horror beyond words." This vision of the almost saved falling into the abyss is what kept him in the confessional for 18 hours a day. He was trying to catch them before they slipped. He was trying to shake them awake. But Vianney also knew that he couldn't save everyone. He saw that for some, the habit of lukewarmness becomes a second nature. It forms a crust around the soul that even the Word of God cannot penetrate. The sermon bounces off. The warnings are ignored. The person says, "He is too strict," or "That was for the old times." This hardening is the final stage before death. It is the spiritual rigor mortis that sets in before the body actually dies. In the final part of this documentary, we will look at the only remedy St. John Vianney prescribed for this sickness. It is not an easy cure. It requires a radical surgery of the heart. We will explore his teachings on the logic of the saints versus the logic of the world, and the specific daily practices he gave to his parishioners to turn a tepid heart into a burning furnace. Because, as he famously said, you must either be a saint or a reprobate. There is no middle ground. So is there hope? Can a branch that is dry and withered become green again? Can a soul that has been lukewarm for 20 or 30 years suddenly catch fire? St. John Vianney shouted a resounding yes, but he added a condition: but it will not happen by accident. You do not drift into holiness, you climb into it, and the climb requires a violent effort against your own nature. The first step in the Curé of Ars prescription is what he called the salutary shock. The lukewarm soul is asleep. To wake a sleeping man, you don't whisper, you shake him. Vianney shook his parishioners with the reality of death and judgment. He taught that the only way to break the hypnosis of the world is to meditate every single day on your own funeral. He told the comfortable Catholics, "You are arranging your house, you are saving money for your old age, you are planning for next year. But who promised you tomorrow?" He urged them to live every day as if it were the last. Imagine that the doctor has given you 24 hours to live. How would you pray today? How would you go to confession? Would you care about the latest fashion or the local gossip? No, you would care only about God. Vianney said, "Be now what you wish to be then." This mental exercise destroys lukewarmness because it destroys the illusion of time. If you are feeling that shock right now, if you realize you have been sleepwalking through your faith, this is the moment to join our mission. We are building a community of souls who refuse to sleep. Subscribe to Divine Echo right now. Do not let this feeling fade. By subscribing, you are telling the algorithm and yourself that you choose truth over entertainment. Join us, and let's fight this battle together. The second remedy is the prayer of the drowning man. Vianney noticed that lukewarm people pray polite prayers. They say, "God, if you want, give me grace." The saint said, "This is useless. You must pray like a man who is drowning in the middle of the ocean." The drowning man doesn't whisper. He screams, "Help me, save me." Vianney advised the tepid soul to wake up every morning and say, "My God, cure me. My God, drag me out of this mud. Make me a saint, no matter the cost." He taught that God cannot resist a desire that is sincere. If you ask for gold, he might say no. If you ask for health, he might say no. But if you ask for him, if you ask for love, he is obliged by his own nature to say yes. The problem is not that God is stingy. It is that our hands are too closed to receive. We are afraid that if we ask for holiness, God might actually give it to us, and we might have to stop watching our favorite sins. The third element of the cure is violence against self. This is unpopular in the modern world. We love comfort, but St. John Vianney was clear: where there is no sacrifice, there is no love. You cannot cure lukewarmness while sitting on a soft couch. You must deny yourself. He didn't mean you have to wear a hair shirt or starve yourself like a monk. He meant the martyrdom of the ordinary. It means biting your tongue when you want to complain. It means turning off the TV to pray the rosary even when you are tired. It means smiling at the person who annoys you. It means giving money to the poor until it actually hurts your wallet. These small acts of violence against your own selfishness act like bellows on a fire. They fan the spark into a flame. Vianney said, "The devil fears the person who conquers his own will more than he fears the person who works miracles." Finally, the Curé of Ars pointed to the source of fire, the Holy Eucharist, but this time received correctly. He told his people to spend at least 15 minutes before Mass preparing their hearts, to empty the trash of the world from their minds before the King enters, and after receiving communion, to stay, to shut their eyes and lock the door of their senses. He said, "When you have received Jesus, do not run out of the church. You have the Creator of the universe in your chest. The angels are surrounding you. Why would you run back to the noise?" He taught that one single communion, received with perfect love and fire, would be enough to make a person a great saint instantly. The reason we are not saints is not that the Eucharist lacks power. It is that we lack thirst. St. John Vianney's final warning is perhaps his most beautiful and terrifying. He said, "To love God, oh how beautiful it is. We have a heart that can love God, and we use it to love dust." He saw the human heart as a vessel made for the infinite. When we fill it with lukewarm things, hobbies, money, reputation, the heart shrinks, it withers. But when we fill it with God, it expands. He saw ordinary peasant women in his village become mystics simply because they decided to stop being lukewarm. They decided to give God everything. And that is the secret. God does not want 99% of your heart. He wants 100%. If you keep 1% for yourself, that 1% is where the lukewarmness hides, and that is where the devil enters. The choice before you is binary. There is no third option. You can continue to be a good, lukewarm Catholic, safe in the eyes of the world, but in danger of the vomit of God. Or you can decide right now to become a saint. It will be hard. It will cost you your comfort. But Saint John Vianney promised, "The struggle is hard, but the reward is infinite." The only tragedy in life, the only real failure, is not to become a saint. Do not let the Curé of Ars be just another story you heard. Let him be your guide. Let his fear of lukewarmness become your fear, and let his burning love become your love. Look at the crucifix. Look at the price paid for your soul. A God who died on a cross was not lukewarm about you. Do not be lukewarm about him. Let us seal this decision with a prayer that St. John Vianney loved. Write it in the comments below as your declaration of war against mediocrity. My God, I give you my whole heart. St. John Vianney, patron of priests and terror of the lukewarm, pray for us that we may vomit out the spirit of the world and consume the fire of God. Amen.